So we're going to learn how to take one part of a photograph and put it into another photograph. A lot of times people say this is photoshopping something. So you'll see a picture with something that doesn't belong in the other photograph. Kind of fun, kind of silly, but we will learn a little bit more about how layers work in doing this project. So the first thing we need to do is find our two pictures. It could be anything. You could put someone who doesn't belong with somebody else. You could put something that doesn't belong with something else. And I'll throw a few examples up on the screen here in the next couple of seconds to show you what I'm talking about. Once you have your image in mind of what you want to do, obviously I've started GIMP. Just as a reminder, if you don't see the Layers, Channels, and Paths window over here, you find that by going to Windows, Recently Closed Docs, and it would appear right here. So the first thing to do is open up both of my images in GIMP. So I go to File, Open, and I put both of mine on the desktop, but you'll obviously go into your own folder to find the images you've saved. So I'll go to Desktop, and I want this one called Cover. Okay, nice pretty scene. And I'm also going to open up a different picture, and that one is called So this is a picture of the most handsome tech teacher ever, obviously. So what we're going to do is we're going to take my image and we're going to put it in this scene like I was there. Okay. Now, if you've been following along and you did the foreground and background activity, you might actually know most of this process. What we would have done in that scenario is use a quick mask and erased out the parts, either erase all the parts on me or all the parts around me. But I'm going to teach you a different way to select in this tutorial. So I'm going to leave the quick mask alone this time, and instead we're going to use paths to separate me from the background. So the paths tool is right here. What I'm going to do is basically go all the way around myself with the paths tool. So just like the quick mask, it's going to be easier for me if I zoom in a bit. So I'm going to click on the window that has my picture. I'm going to hold down Shift and press plus a few times, and I'll go ahead and maximize this window. So the way the paths work is I'm going to start down here in the corner, and I'm going to click along myself. Now, obviously, the more clicks I do, the more refined and the more accurate I'm going to be. If I were to try to go from this point to this point, clearly I'm not being very accurate. Rather, I should go very slowly around my lapel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the video because there's no need for you to watch me go all the way around. I'll be back in just a moment. So about halfway through here, and I realized that I didn't mention a couple of things that you should probably know. With these path nodes, and they're called nodes, I can grab one and replace it wherever I want. That includes my most recent node right here, or a node in the middle. So keep that in mind, that you can still work on these as you go around. So I'm going to continue going around. I'll be back in just a moment. So I've just about come to the end of my path. I'm going to make the last one down here. I'm going to come all the way over because this needs to be sort of a closed loop here. And when I click on the very first node I made, I am going to hold down the Control key. And that's going to sort of connect them all into one sort of closed loop. Now what I need to do is press Enter. I'll actually zoom out a little bit by pressing the minus key. Yep, you can see the little marching ants going around. And And so really, I've got myself selected. There's one more thing I'm going to do to make sure that I get a very good selection. I'm going to go up to the select button, and I'm going to do what's called feathering the selection. The feathering is going to blur the borders out a little bit here and there, sort of randomly, and it's going to make it look a lot more natural. So I'm going to go to feather, and it does it in pixels. The pixels are very, very small dots. You'll notice that as you zoom in to a picture like this, when you get really, 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 really close, painfully close, you can see lots of little squares, tiny little squares that make up the image. They're so small that you can't really see them when you're zoomed out, but every picture is composed of these little tiny squares, and they're called pixels. Earlier, when I had you find a picture and I asked you to find pictures that were of a certain size, that size was measured in pixels. So this picture is 1,483 pixels by 1,433 pixels. So there are 1,433 pixels from left to right. So you can tell they're very, very small. So when I do my feather function, so when we talk about feathering, we're talking about very little bits here and there. So I'm going to go to select and feather. I'm going to feather it by about 15 pixels. So I already typed in 15, and I'm going to press OK. And that's just going to make things look a little bit smoother when I grab myself off of this picture and put it into another picture. Okay, so I have my selection, I'm ready to go, and now really it's a matter of cutting and pasting myself from this image to the other image. So I'm going to go up to Edit. I'm going to copy myself. I'm going to bring back up my landscape scene. I am going to paste that in there. And the first thing I notice is, wow, I'm really, really big. That's not how I intended myself to be. But if you'll notice, this picture is 1,200 pixels by 1,200 pixels, which is actually a little bit smaller than my picture of me. So I'm just going to make myself smaller. I'm going to do that. Actually, before I get to that, you'll notice over here I have two sort of layers going on. I have the background layer, which is underneath, and I have this thing called the floating selection. That's what I just pasted into this picture. Well, I'm going to go ahead and make it a full-fledged layer. I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to tell it to be a new layer. So now I have two layers. I have myself, just me, and I have the background. Now I'm going to go over, I'm going to make sure I'm clicked on my layer, and it's dark blue. And this button right here is called Scale. Now, scale in most of the tools we're going to use is one way of saying we're going to resize something. We're going to make it bigger or smaller. So when I click on Scale, and then I'm going to click on Me, these boxes come up. And there's a couple ways I could do this. I could grab one of the rectangles and begin to pull in. But what might be better is to actually use this dialog box that popped up. You'll see this little chain link, and right now the chain link is not connected. That means it's not locked. I could change my width, which is 1483, and let me just start to change that. And you'll notice the height's not changing. Okay? And so what's going to happen is I'm going to get really skinny without changing my height at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click those together, and now when I change one, I will automatically change the other. So I'm going to click down, and things are going kind of slow because I'm recording. So I'm just going to go ahead and, if this is 1460, let's try half of that. Let's just try 700. And press Enter. And you'll see that the width and the height sort of both changed on their own. That's looking closer. I might actually even go down to 500 and press Scale again. And it's given me a very much smaller version of myself, which is closer to what I was looking for. I'm going to grab my Move tool, and Move is always signified by these sort of 4 arrows. And I'm going to make sure I click on myself. And to make this look real, I need to put myself down on the bottom of the screen. If I just do this, I'm a floating head. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to make sure that I work correctly with what I have. And so I'm going to come down here, put myself in the corner, and there you go. If we look really closely, we start to see a little bit of white around the edges here. And that's because I didn't take my time with the path tool like I should have. or maybe I feathered a little bit too much, but you can start to see how it really degrades the image if I don't take my time cutting it out. It just looks fake. Now everyone's going to know that I wasn't in that image originally. Now what I've decided to do is I need to go back into this image and clean this up, because this is not good enough. This is not believable right now. It clearly looks like I'm not actually in the picture. So I've zoomed in, and I grabbed my eraser tool. And the cool thing about layers is that if I have the layer of me selected and I begin to erase, I can only touch what's on that layer. I can only touch me. But if I come over here, I'm not erasing that layer because there's nothing there to erase. I'm only erasing this one layer. So I'm going to undo. And so now, like we did before with the quick mask, I can zoom in here and I can get rid of that white background. And this is the perfect time to switch from my normal circular brush to one of my fuzzy brushes. The fuzzy brushes, they're stronger in the middle than they are on the outside. And it makes it easier. And you see, that's sort of a feathering effect on its own. So it sort of feathers a little bit, and it looks more real than sort of this hard line that I made with the other brush. So I'm going to come through here. The thing with this fuzzy brush is if I get a little bit too much, it's not as noticeable. And you'll see that I can definitely get rid of all of this light part that does not belong. So I'm going to pause real quick. I'm going to go through and do that again so that you can see how much better it looks when I'm totally done. And so what I've done is I actually went through and I did the left-hand half of my body, and I erased that junk that shouldn't be there. But I left some of the stuff over here just to give you an idea of how much better it looks. If we zoom in a little bit, we'll see that if we really try and look over here, I've got much more natural blending, and in the picture over here I still have some of that white background that I wasn't able to fully get rid of, and that's going to be a dead giveaway every time. So make sure when you're doing this process that you are being very careful about taking your time, being patient, and fixing up what needs to be fixed up. So last step, of course, is to save. And this is very important because, as you'll recall, there are two ways to save. If you are not done and you think you might want to come back and work on this some more, then it is very important that you save this as an XCF file, which is what GIMP uses as its file extension. If you are very sure you are finished, then you should use a JPG file extension at the end. If I say this is a JPG, what's going to happen is this layer of me on top and this background layer are going to get smushed together. They're going to become one layer. And if I try to come back and work on it some more, I won't be able to work with those two layers. It's just going to be one single picture. If I save this instead as an XCF file, these two layers will stay two layers, and I can come back and edit it some more. The best possible thing for you to do is to save it as both. That way you have the JPEG, but if you ever want to come back and work on it some more, you have the XCF file. Just remember to turn in the finished JPEG file. So we should go to File, Save As. Okay, and right now it wants to save it as a JPEG file, which is what I'll do if I'm totally finished. But before I'm going to do that, I'm going to save it instead as an XCF file, that GIMP file. Once I've saved it as an XCF file, I'm going to come back and save it as a JPEG file, and I'll have two. I'll call that blend.jpg. I'll hit save. It's going to tell me I need to export it. Press save one last time. Now, if I go back to the desktop, which is where I was saving it, of course you'll be saving it in your My Documents folder. You're going to see that when I save it as the XCF file, my little GIMP guy is on that picture. That tells you that's an XCF file. That is a GIMP file. You can only open that on a computer that has GIMP on it, and most computers don't. These other files, like the one below, which I called Blend, and these up here, these are JPEG files, and they can be opened on any computer. That's what you actually have to send me, is this one. Do not send me your GIMP XCF file.